Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Oceans of Slumber, Starlight, and Ash, out July 22nd on Century Media Records. The album has 11 tracks, 50 minutes in length, and this is the band's fifth full-length studio album. They are an American progressive metal band. As far as the design goes, this album has a natural progression to it. It's an album that has great flow. It doesn't really force the listener. You're just immersed in it, and then you just go where it goes. The current of the album does all the movement. It takes you where it needs to take you. So it's a record that's built really for you to lose track of time. Time stands still. This record allows you to just completely forget about everything that's around you and just concentrate on what the sound and the experience of the record offers. It's also an album that has two common points that ground and make this album feel a little bit more balanced, a little bit more cohesive from start to finish. And those two common points are the atmosphere that the record has, which is this dark embrace that's present in the first all the way to the last song. It may change in terms of how dark it becomes. That embrace changes in terms of thickness, in terms of the feeling that it offers, but it's always there. And then the other one is the common ground that each and every single song has, the theme that they have. In my humble opinion, this album is a collection of love letters, 11 different love letters. Now you can argue, oh, who wrote these letters? Who are they for? Metaphorically speaking, these are love letters to Cammie's voice, to her vocals, allowing her to showcase all the talent, all the soul, all the warmth that exists within her. That's what this album is all about, and you see that in the structure, you see that in the design, you see that in the way it's put together, and you see that in the way it's delivered. Now, outside of these two common points, you have a lot of diversity. The album doesn't stand still. Like I said earlier, the atmosphere changes, different shades of darkness, and those different shades of darkness really comes from the changes within the sound, the changes within the song constructions from track to track. So there is some volatility that allows the waters to never be completely calm, that allows for that movement to exist, that really pushes and engages the listener from beginning all the way to the end. Sound-wise, this is perhaps their most experimental record to date. It's also their least metal record to date. This album pushes the boundaries of how far you can go with a record to make it sound acoustic, to make it sound unplugged without being acoustic, without being unplugged. It's right at that cusp, and that is something fresh, that is something new, but something that they did really well and allows that atmosphere that exists, that sense of darkness that exists, to become super noticeable on every single song. And then you can also tell the differences, the changes, the influences that come in and dictate exactly where these songs start and where these songs finish. So if this is not their most metal album, or in my opinion their least metal album to date, so what's influencing the sound? Well, that's simple. Jazz, soul, R&B, blues, rock. All of those have a place within the soundscape of this record. Some songs more of one, some songs less of the other, but all of those elements are really the core of the sound of this album. This is not a metal record. That doesn't mean the album is not good. It just offers a different kind of soundscape, a different kind of experience, and it's going to take you on a completely different journey from anything that they've released up until this point. So there is a sense of uniqueness with this album. This album is going to stand on its own, at least up to this point, within their discography. I know it's a short discography, 5 albums, but this record really stands out in the crowd. It has uniqueness to how it's developed, to how it's put together, the sound, construction, lyrical content, and obviously vocal delivery. I love the experience that it offers, and I think if you come into this album expecting less of a metal record and more of a great sounding album, you're going to be pleased with what they put forward as far as the sound experience is concerned. Now, within that sound experience, two elements jump out immediately. One is the keys and the other one is the vocals. This record is really about those two elements. There's no point talking about bass, there's no point talking about guitars, there's no point talking about drums. Not to say that they don't play a role, but when you create an album that feels so stripped out, that feels acoustic at times, unplugged at others, those elements become part of the atmosphere, they become part of the essence, and they're not necessarily the cornerstones in which the album is built around. The album is built around the keyboards, the piano, and the vocals. The keyboards, pianos, absolutely phenomenal. The Spring of 21, an instrumental piano track, that bleeds into the song that comes after. Just absolutely phenomenal track. It becomes the climax of what the keyboards, what the pianos are doing throughout the entire record. They're always there. They're always playing a role. They're always defining the parameters and the borders of these songs and the energy and atmosphere that they have. But on that track, with nothing else around them, you can really see how important, how significant they are within the construction and sound of this album. The other element is the vocals. And the vocals get to shine on every single track, obviously with the exception of that one, but they get to shine on every single track. And like I said earlier, this record really becomes a collection of love songs to Cammie's voice. It's not to say that she's never really been able to be herself or be free in how she performs and how she uses that voice. But I think this album puts her in a different light. It gives her different cues. It gives her different elements. It gives her a different platform in which perhaps she's more comfortable. She's more organic in her delivery. It feels more natural. It doesn't feel like she's singing. It feels like she's talking to you. And because she takes that approach, that more natural approach, using clean vocals throughout the entire record, using her voice to create ebbs and flows in terms of pain, aggression, sorrow, a sense of almost being hopeless. All of these emotions are alive and well throughout the record, but you don't need to use harsh vocals to get them across. You can do them in your tone, in your delivery, in your tempos, and that's exactly what she's doing throughout this entire album, making her voice be that second cornerstone of how this record is put together. Magnificent performance from start to finish. In my humble opinion, this is the best that we've seen from her up to this point. This album gives you something that you've never seen before. It gives you a more natural, a more stripped out, like I said, a more organic vocal performance from Cammie. What can I say about this record that I haven't said yet? I think this album deserves more. And it's an album that's going to be a little bit interesting for the listener. If you are a fan of the band, I don't think this album is going to surprise you, but there's still going to be surprises within it because it doesn't have that edgier sound. It's not really a prog album. Like I said, it's not even a metal album. It's an album that goes in a much different direction. But it still has Oceans of Slumber. It's still Oceans of Slumber through and through. It's a record that, in my opinion, deserves more. And what I mean by that is that it has such incredible atmosphere, has such incredible construction, such incredible song structures, incredible delivery vocally and musically, that you almost wanted them to take it further down the line. Really push it into a different level. Live in the studio, unplugged, so they can be even more organic, so they can be even more natural. I hope this release allows them to do something like that in the future, perhaps down the line in an anniversary edition, something along those lines. This album has life. It has life now, it's going to have life tomorrow, and it's going to have life in the future. It's really a defining moment style record for any band. It breaks the mold of everything that they did. It keeps their DNA and showcases you how far they can go and still keep the Oceans of Slumber sound and essence alive and well. It's going to be one of those albums for the ages. In my opinion, is a masterpiece of a record, regardless if you consider it a metal album or not. If you're going to be one of those purists, you're perhaps going to say that this is their worst album to date because it doesn't check some of those boxes. But if you're looking from a pure musical perspective, this is definitely their best crafted album to date. Now, as far as favorite songs goes, I want to start off with Red Forest Roads. Incredible intro, an intro that then gives birth to this southern twang sound that is so soulful. It's a mixture of blues, rock, R&B, all of them mixed together with some jazz elements as well. Such an incredible creation musically and vocally. The guitar melody on this track is absolutely phenomenal. It's beautiful in the sound and brings that southern twang to the forefront, allowing that to become the calling card of the entire track. That rock blues essence permeates from start all the way to the finish. A track that builds towards a more explosive end. And that explosive end is really interesting because it's not heavy. It's just bigger. It's just the song becomes bigger, has more volume, it expands. Up until that point, it feels like it's moving through a very narrow lane. And then when it gets towards the last third, that narrow lane becomes a highway. So the song just becomes bigger, but bigger doesn't mean necessarily heavier. interesting approach, interesting way of changing the dynamic of the song, of giving the song something extra, changing how you feel towards it without really changing the DNA and the overall essence of the entire album. Next we have Salvation, a really stripped down song. It feels like a dark ballad through and through. It's a song that doesn't have a lot of ebbs and flows, stays very consistent, it stays in the pocket. It has a very subdued approach as far as guitars and drums are concerned, almost more of a jazz sound as far as the drums go, and then the guitars complement that experience all the way throughout. Now, when you have this kind of subdued approach, when you have this dark sounding track, the vocals really jump into the forefront, and this allows Cami to really be on a pedestal because everything is a mile behind her, and it's just her voice that's driving the track, that's driving the experience, that's really connecting with the listener. When you listen to this song, the sound becomes secondary. It becomes a soundtrack to what she's telling you, to how she's coming across, to how she's defining the moments of the track itself. Phenomenal track from that perspective. It feels very simple, but it's not a very simple track at all. Next we have Star Altar. This song has a sense of two worlds. There are two worlds within this track. There is that world of more aggression, of bigger sound, bigger impact, and then the one that's more subdued, that's more control, that's a little bit in the shadows. Moving between them is what gives this track its ebbs and flows, is what creates movement, is what makes this song engaging. It has bite at times, musically and vocally, and then it also has a sense of letting go. Hopelessness, perhaps, is a good word to describe that emotion that comes across in those quieter moments, in those more subdued moments. Having those peaks and valleys really makes this track feel like it's moving a lot better. Otherwise, it would become very methodic, predictable even, and it would lose a little bit of itself within itself. This is it. Oceans of Slumber, Starlight and Ash, out July 22nd on Century Media. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.